6 months after You Really Got Me hit #1 on the charts, the Kinks would record 2 albums, score 3 hit singles, and play in 7 countries around the world. During this whirlwind period, the Kinks stopped by to tape a segment on the American TV shows Hullabaloo and Shindig.
If you look at the Kinks on Shindig, they're wearing these Edwardian suits, but at the same time they're singing this incredibly scruffy music.
Their initial appearance was a success. The Kinks wouldn't make it back to America until June 1965, when they were booked to headline a U.S. tour. The Kinks, however, were not accustomed to the workings of the American music industry.
America, for me, was a very strange place.
When we first went to America, it was a catalogue of disasters anyway, because the management sort of pulled it together and threw us out there and amongst it all, and it's a bad time to go, really.
In the middle of the tour, their manager, Larry Page, deserted them.
He left us high and dry and came home with Sonny and Cher to promote their record.
Oh, we didn't know what to do. We just stood there with our luggage and he just left.
They were doing that American tour with no management, which was a very odd thing.
The Kinks were falling apart. They were running wild in a foreign land, and they had no management to guide them.
I can't imagine that what they were doing anything that anybody else wasn't doing at that time, but it was just, it just happened to be their bad luck.
I mean, every group in England understood that you have to get the American market or you'll starve.
Everything came crashing down, and the Kinks were suddenly banned from the American market. While there's never been a definitive answer as to why this happened, there were several theories.
Maybe it was to do with the management. Maybe they didn't, pay the people who needed to be paid.
The basic story is one of the Kinks got into a fist fight with some union guy. There was no management around to sort it out, and it ended up in some kind of ban during the prime of their life.
We did something that we shouldn't have done. A scuffle broke out because someone said the wrong thing and we couldn't be there.
The Kinks would not play in America for another 4 years. The youth revolution would continue without them.
They're banned from 64 to 68, which is the actual apex of the pop era in the biggest marketplace in the world.
That was prime time, as all the other bands got bigger and bigger. Here in America, they didn't.
The Kinks had no way of getting there, and sure enough, after that first British invasion rush, the Kinks kind of slide off the map for America.
In one way, it was a setback, and in another way, it was the best thing that could have happened to us.
Ray Davis soon lost interest in the magic of swinging London. Instead, his music and songwriting started to take on a whole new perspective.
They went on to do something completely different as their career progressed.
Ray took his songwriting in a different direction after that. He's more of an anthropologist on looking at life in England.
With songs like Well-Respected Man, Dedicated Follower of Fashion. These are like more short story-like versions of songs that the Beatles would put out.
He conveyed just a feeling of the times and a feeling of a certain place, London at that time. Waterloo Sunset was one of the most beautiful songs ever.
Dirty old river, must you keep rolling, flowing into the night.
The Kinks raised the artistic ambition level on tiny little 3-minute pop songs. They can be character studies, they can be part of a concept album, they can be like short stories.
As long as I gaze on Waterloo sunset, I am in paradise.
This new style of music moves the band into new creative territory, but it does not get them back on the rock and roll scene.
From my point of view, I just wanted to go out there and do gigs, Need to do that to earn the money for the band.
The band raised the bar artistically when they released the album The Village Green Preservation Society.
The Village Green Preservation Society is the LP that the Kinks recorded mostly throughout 1968.
When we did it, I thought it was wonderful, and it was exploratory, and I think it was Ray's attempt at trying to write solo work.
It's an extremely smart record, well beyond the capability of most young men in their 20s. Most people don't have that kind of perspective on life or society. They don't look around them and go, things are changing really quickly. Are we losing anything with all that we're gaining?
A collection of songs, much against the current of the times, about village greens, cricket, cups of tea, but also about memory and regret and growing old and nostalgia. You know, a concept album in the real sense, in that it's held together by mood and by ideas.
It was just a total joy that made that album. It really was.
At the time, Village Green seemed completely out of date, anachronistic. It's 1968. It's the year of revolution, of Vietnam, of loud rock and roll, of riots in Grosvenor Square and in Paris, and it was released in November of that year, on the same day that the Beatles released the White Album and Jimi Hendrix released Electric Ladyland.
The album ended up being a huge commercial failure.
People don't care that much about what we've lost. You tend to care about the future and the present in rock and roll, to care about the past, the way that Ray Davies seemed to. It's not a formula for massive, massive stardom.
Whereas the Beatles sold 2 million copies of the White Album in its first week of release worldwide, the Kinks sold in total worldwide 25,000 copies of the Village Green Preservation Society. It doesn't chart anywhere in the world. It's a commercial disaster.
Adding to their troubles, the Kinks family would soon be fractured by the departure of one of its original members.
Well, I left the group because one of the biggest problems I had in those days was I was suffering from enormous claustrophobia. Right? And I was finding myself locked up in planes, in studios, in dressing rooms and everything.
Pete Quaif's departure in 1969 came around the same time that the ban in America had been lifted. In order to return to the USA, the Kinks needed to find a new bassist.
When John Dalton joined us, that was a good time.
With John Dalton rounding out the foursome, the Kinks were ready to shed their nostalgic English perspective and try to get back in the game. The player they chose to carry their banner, a transvestite named Lola.
In the club down in Old Soho, where you drink champagne and it tastes just like cherry cola.
Robert, our manager, was in a nightclub. I don't know verbatim what happened.
She walked up to me and she asked me to dance.
Robert found himself dancing at 5 o'clock in the morning with this beautiful woman that had started the beginnings of, you know. Ray is great at pulling those elements out and embellishing them.
After 4 years of releasing cynical songs about British society, the Kinks managed to get back on the charts with their quirky hit song about an unusual subject. At this point, the Kinks were ready for a second American invasion, but they never imagined how a partnership with a Yankee music mogul would change their lives.
By the late 1970s, the Kinks are signed to Clive Davis's label Arista, and they are making big American hit records. Finally, for the first time since the early 1960s.